Great. Let's get started this fantastic session on accessibility and touch. I'm Narges Mahyar. I'm an associate professor at University of Massachusetts Amherst, and I'm excited to be able to moderate this session. So first off, we have Brianna Wimer presenting a paper entitled Beyond Vision Impairment, Redefining the Scope of Accessibility Data Representation. Brianna, please take it away.
Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brianna Wimer from the University of Notre Dame, and today I have the privilege of presenting our paper, Beyond Vision Impairments, Redefining the Scope of Accessible Data Representations. And so recently, there's been a growing focus on making data visualizations more accessible. And this shift is largely due to a greater awareness of how much essential information is still inaccessible to many, something that COVID-19 made especially clear for us. And inaccessible data isn't just an inconvenience, it's also an equity issue. So this focus became particularly critical for the blind and low vision community, leading researchers to explore tactile and auditory alternatives for visualizations. However, they are not the only community that faces barriers. There's been a significant lack of support for other disability communities, and it's important for us to understand how data visualizations impact those with non-vision disabilities so that we can make them more accessible and inclusive. So the major question we sought to address in this paper is, what is accessible data visualization for non-vision disabilities? And so our objectives were twofold. First, we wanted to understand the entire space of accessible data visualizations without focusing solely on the blind and low vision community. And second, we wanted to understand and investigate these underrepresented disability communities so that we could identify specific opportunities and challenges for greater inclusion in data visualization. And so to achieve this, we employed a systematic review following the Prisma methodology. So we collected papers from January 2000 to December 2022 using search terms focused on both visualizations and disability-related terminology. And so our primary sources were the ACM and IEEE databases. However, we also searched conferences where accessible data would be highly relevant, such as CHI and VIS. So initially, we identified 913 papers. And so from the 913 studies that we found, we refined our corpus to 152 papers that met our inclusion and exclusion criteria. So we focused on studies that directly addressed accessibility related to disabilities and or impairments, and specifically dealt with the accessibility of a data-driven representation. And so since our focus was on underrepresented communities, we also created a new data set from that corpus. So we examined the titles and abstracts from the 152 papers to identify those that were not exclusively centered on vision impairments. So papers would be considered eligible if they addressed a non-visual disability, took a non-specific accessibility perspective, for example, focusing on multiple disabilities, or if they discussed vision impairments alongside at least one non-visual disability. So this resulted in a final set of 34 papers. And so for the data synthesis and analysis, we employed both qualitative and quantitative approaches across the two data sets that we had. So for the initial 152 paper corpus, we focused on providing an overview of the current state of research in accessible data representations, allowing us to capture the broader trends and gaps in this field. And for the 34 paper corpus, we conducted a more detailed analysis to explore how different research objectives, methods, and data representations were used differently across various disability communities. And so our Prisma methodology yielded three main contributions. First, we identified trends in accessible data representations, clarifying the current state of the field. Second, we developed a taxonomy for non-vision impairment that merges aspects from data visualization, human-computer interaction, and accessibility. And lastly, we outlined future research opportunities aiming to enhance the inclusivity of visualizations for all disabilities. And so for our analysis of trends in accessible data, we looked at the chronological distribution of all 152 papers to understand how the field has evolved over time. And so one key finding that we found was the volume of papers in 2021 nearly doubled compared to the previous year, which we believe was due to COVID-19 exposing a lot of limitations of existing practices. However, though, interestingly enough, the first paper that addressed non-vision accessibility actually appeared in 2005, showing that while vision-related research has dominated typically, there has been a gradual recognition of the need for broader accessibility. And so after categorizing the community of focus within each paper, we found that an overwhelming 119 out of 152 papers, so 78% of accessible data visualization research, focused solely on individuals who are blind or have low vision. In contrast, other disability communities, such as those with motor or physical disabilities, older adults, and other various cognitive disabilities, received significantly less attention, making up only 22% of our corpus. And so the taxonomy that we created for non-vision impairments included classifications from data visualization, human-computer interaction, and accessibility fields. And so we organized it into 3 broad categories. So first, research objectives, which focus on the goals and target communities of the studies. So this included dimensions such as community of focus, issues addressed, and contribution type. Second, research methodology, so which covers the methods and participants involved in those research processes. So those dimensions here are study methods and participants involved. And lastly, data representations, which describes the types and domains of data that's being used. So this category included data type, data domain, and visualization type. And for a more detailed breakdown of these categories and a distribution of the papers, I encourage everyone to refer to the rest of our paper. And so while much of the focus has been on visual impairments typically, this limits the potential for broader impact. Expanding the scope of accessible data representations means thinking beyond visual accessibility and deepening our understanding of what accessible data actually looks like for other disabilities. So now let's explore some of those opportunities where we can make data representations more inclusive. So often when we talk about data visualization accessibility, the focus is usually on converting visualizations into other formats. However, though, we actually found instances throughout our review where visualizations were actually used to create an accessible representation. So for example, we found that for the deaf or hard of hearing community, visualizations such as word clouds and one-pixel displays were actually used to convey sound and meaning information, making that data more accessible through a visual representation. And also, in addition, expanding the scope of accessible data representations means recognizing the ways in which visualizations can be inaccessible. So we need to expand our understanding of neurodiverse perspectives to tailor visualizations for a broader cognitive spectrum. So since visualizations are often grounded in cognitive psychology, they tend to be more so designed for neurotypical users, leaving insufficient support for neurodivergent populations. And in our review, we found multiple researchers that actually highlighted the need for new guidelines to make data more accessible for neurodiverse communities, such as those with intellectual and developmental disabilities and also other cognitive disabilities. And data visualizations they're meant to help people gain relevant insights, but the data most relevant to people with disabilities is often missing from these visualizations. And there's little guidance on how we can include access-related data into visualizations. And by access-related data, we mean information that just improves the usability of visualizations for people with disabilities, such as identifying barriers, services, or resources within a visual context. So for example, incorporating transit accessibility data into maps can help people with ambulatory disabilities navigate their environment more effectively, making these visualizations more useful and also more inclusive. And in addition, accessible data representations aren't just about how data is being consumed, they also involve how users interact with it. So relying solely on point-and-click interactions excludes people who use the various types of assistive technologies. So we saw examples throughout our review of gaze-based interactions for people with motor disabilities or voice-activated interfaces for older adults. However, to ensure true accessibility, future research should focus on expanding alternative interactions and improving compatibility with a wide range of assistive technologies, as this will allow everyone to both consume and interact with data more accessibly. And so for our concluding thoughts, We advocate for accessible data that includes various representations, guidelines, and interactions designed to meet the diverse needs of different disability communities. By redefining the scope of accessible data representations, we can move beyond the limited focus on visual accessibility. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank my co-authors, Laura South and Keke Wu, as well as our PhD advisors, Danielle Szafir, Michelle Borkin, and Ron Metoyer for their invaluable support throughout this entire paper. I look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I personally really like that you're taking this really important problem of broader inclusion beyond the visual impairment. So everyone, please do send your question through Slido. I'm monitoring Slido. We do have one question actually. Can you share more about other accessibility issues for visualization? I only think I know about or have seen examples of blindness for vision challenges.
Yeah, of course. So one great paper that I would love to point out, which is one of my co-authors' paper, Keke Wu actually had a paper out there that was about how visualizations can be inaccessible for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and how a lot of times, a lot of research assumes that sometimes visualizations just need to be simplified, or more complex visualizations would be inaccessible for that community. But we actually found that that is not exactly true. And so it's just that they process information a lot more differently than neurotypical users. So it involves just having a new set of guidelines to understand how that data can be represented more accessibly.
Perfect. One more quick question. What are some resources to assist analysts with creating accessible visualization that help with other types of inclusions?
Oh, I see moments like this. I do wish that we were not virtual so I could ask what they mean by other types of inclusion. I would say the best thing that I've been told and what I've been using to make my data more accessible, or at least any representation that I've been introduced with, is looking at different frameworks that exist, such as like the Chartability framework, and also looking at different research papers. Because I think for when it comes to non-vision impairment, which is what we're talking about in this paper, there are less guidelines that are more explicit on how we can have visualizations be accessible. And so that's kind of where we wanted to make this paper so that we could call a broader need for adding more guidelines and interactions and representations for non-vision accessibility. So, but when it comes to actual vision accessibility, there are a lot more documents out there that should lead people and help analysts be able to make their visualizations more accessible.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Please continue the conversation on Discord. And now we need to move on to the next presentation, which is going to be done by Yash Prakash. And the paper is Towards Enhancing Low Vision Usability of Data Charts on Smartphones.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So hello, my name is Yash Prakash. I'm a PhD student, and I will be presenting our paper titled Towards Enhancing Low Vision Usability of Data Charts on Smartphones. As we know, data charts are essential tools for quick comparisons and trend analysis, but they pose significant challenges for low vision users who rely heavily on screen magnifier-based assistive technologies. Due to limited screen size on smartphones, users can only see small portions of a chart at a time, which leads to excessive panning and high cognitive load as they try to piece together information. To better understand these challenges, we conducted an interview study with 14 low vision participants. In response to challenges faced by low vision participants, we developed GraphLight, a mobile-based assistive technology that allows low vision users to customize charts, enabling them to selectively view and compare data points with ease. In a user study with 26 participants, GraphLight demonstrated significant improvements, reducing task completion times and receiving high positive feedback compared to traditional screen magnifiers and table conversion methods. In the interview study with 14 low vision participants, we identified three key challenges with bar and line charts. First, associating data points with axis labels was difficult for 12 participants due to magnification issues and frequent panning leading to loss of context. Second, comparing distinct data points was tiring for 8 participants. Taller bars often overshadowed smaller ones, and smudging in line charts made trends harder to analyze. Third, memorizing data values was a common workaround for 6 participants, as comparing data points directly became too difficult, especially with many data points. These findings highlighted the need for a tailored solution for low vision users. GraphLight's design is based on insights from low vision users from our interview study, as well as prior research on visual memory. For sighted individuals, processing visual data involves selective attention, which helps store key information in long-term memory. However, for low vision users, this process is more challenging due to impairments like smudging and blurring, making it harder to identify key features in charts. To address this, GraphLight focuses on optimizing what we call locus of selection, allowing users to break down visual tasks into smaller manageable segments. GraphLight should support both early and late selection by enabling users to selectively focus on important data points and interact with multiple views of a chart, allowing for deeper cognitive processing and more effective analysis of complex data. It should also offer customization options for visual attributes like color and contrast, which helps filter out irrelevant sensory input early on, thereby reducing various visual disturbances that occur through various data charts. This is the architecture of GraphLight prototype. When a web page is loaded, GraphLight uses a custom train inception v3 model to recognize and classify charts. It then extracts charts information using an extended chart OCR model. Users can interact with chart through a proxy interface by tapping to select data points of their choice and creating multiple custom views of the chart. Low vision users can effortlessly interact with data charts using GraphLight on their smartphones. By simply tapping on the desired chart, the proxy interface is activated, automatically adjusting bar width and height to maximize screen usage. Users can then swipe upwards to access the theme picker, enabling comprehensive chart customization options such as contrast, color, and access label fonts and size. Subsequently, users can invoke a customization menu with a tap gesture, allowing them to selectively view specific data points by tapping next. After finalizing all of their selections, users can finally click the Done button. A slide gesture then enables users to navigate through all the selected choices, with the selected points being re-rendered to optimize screen space. For more advanced customization, users can select specific bars and use the same theme picker to apply individualized color adjustments to each bar of their choice, thereby enhancing their overall data interpretation experience. In a comprehensive user study evaluating GraphLight, we recruited 26 low vision users through emails, word of mouth, and nonprofit organizations. All participants were familiar with screen magnifiers and smartphone web browsing. In our within subject experimental setup, participants performed representative chart tasks under 5 conditions. Screen magnifier, this represents the baseline where participants use standard screen magnification features. Tabular representation, here charts were converted into tables, allowing participants to interact with data in a tabular format. GraphLight with space compaction, this condition basically involved only the space compaction feature, reducing horizontal and vertical scrolling to improve usability. GraphLight with space compaction and configuration, in this condition, participants use both the space compaction feature and customization options such as adjusting color, contrast, and font size. The last is the GraphLight with space compaction, configuration, and feature selection. This condition included all of the prior features and selective data point focus, allowing participants to fully utilize GraphLight's capabilities. In the study, participants engaged in 4 main types of tasks. First one is the pairwise comparison. This task required participants to compare data points, helping them to understand specific differences between selected values. Selective filtering, here participants filtered data by a certain criteria, focusing on specific ranges or conditions that exist within the dataset. Trend prediction, this task involved forecasting trends based on the available data. Trend comparison, finally participants compared trends over various periods of time, helping them to assess and interpret challenges in data over a period of time. Our results for completion time for each task across various study conditions showed that the SCCF condition or the graphlight condition with all of the features consistently outperformed all the others, showing the fastest task completion time and reducing overall cognitive load, especially for complex tasks like trend analysis. The TBL condition was effective for simple comparisons, but it struggled with more complex tasks. In contrast, the SM condition had the worst performance, with participants facing difficulties in panning and focus. Overall, SCCF proved to be the most effective solution for interacting with both bar and line charts. In our study, all participants completed all the tasks in the SCCF and TBL conditions. We further conducted two usability studies, that is NASA TLX and SUS. NASA TLX measures workload with scores ranging from 0 to 100, where lower scores indicate less effort and lower cognitive load. And SUS measures perceived usability on a scale from 0 to 100, with higher scores indicating better usability. The SCCF condition scored the highest on usability and had the lowest workload, making it the most effective. Participants provided valuable qualitative feedback in exit interviews, highlighting the importance of customization options, especially dark themes, which Graphlight effectively addressed. They expressed a desire for features to reduce vertical panning and introduce autofocus gestures for easier navigation. Many participants also suggested adding a filtering feature to the tabular chart representation, similar to Graphlight's filtering for improved usability. Finally, integrating the tooltip feature into Graphlight significantly enhanced efficiency in interacting with bar and line charts. However, our work was not without limitations, and the study also illuminated some of the shortcomings of our approach, thereby exposing avenues for future research. Graphlight's dependency on accurate data extraction limits its effectiveness with complex or low-quality charts, necessitating further evaluation in the wild. It does not retain chart annotations that have been annotated by chart designers like color, which can impact message clarity. Future work will include developing algorithms to identify key relationships in data, expanding to iOS, and studying effects of zooming and panning. Moreover, we will focus on newer ideas such as predictive magnification that automates the magnifier's movement to focus on key chart regions based on data saliency, thereby reducing manual input by low vision users, and details on demand type of interactions, allowing users to access additional information about specific chart elements. So this concludes the presentation. So we are planning to launch Graphlight for real-time deployment on App Store as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Yash. We have a question on Slido. Danielle says, it's interesting challenge. I'm curious how you all are thinking about balancing customizability versus accessible menu navigation.
Yeah, so those two are independent features. The initial part, we had to look at trade-offs. So trade-offs is a very top topic in visualization where you can add a particular feature and then you can conduct a user study to only assess that feature. But if that does not increase your system's evaluation and accuracy compared to baseline, then you will require additional options that you can add in your system that can improve the overall evaluation in the user study. So in our interview study, we understood that these are two key factors, that is customization and allowing users to apply selective attention to choose different bars in their bar chart. So we evaluated them separately, as you can see in the user study. We had SC condition to evaluate Graphlight with customization, and then we had SCC condition to evaluate Graphlight with customization and the filtering option. So that is how we took the approach in our paper.
Excellent, thank you. I do have a question I posted on Discord, but if you can answer it very quickly, what strategies can be implemented to encourage long-term adoption of your system, especially considering potential barriers for users such as familiarity with technology and accessibility of smartphones?
Well, in our qualitative feedback in the exit interview, we did not get any statements by participants where they stated that they could not use the system or it was heavily complex, because most of the complexity of Graphlight lies in the back end, but the front end that users interact with is very simple.
Sounds perfect. Thank you so much, Yash. Next, we are moving to Kim Marriott, who's presenting a paper on when refreshable tactile displays meet conversational agents, investigating accessible data presentation and analysis with touch and speech. So Yash, if you can stop screen sharing so Kim can share his screen. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm Kim Marriott from Monash Uni in Australia. And actually, at the moment, I'm in an Airbnb in Dallas. I'm presenting this on behalf of my co-authors, Sam Reinders, Manaz Asaya, Matt Butler, Bongshin Lee, Ingrid Zukerman, and Lizen Q. So I'm going to be telling you about how we combined a refreshable tactile display with a conversational agent to provide accessible data visualizations to people who are blind and low vision. The image on the right is of a refreshable tactile display. So why did we do this research? Decision-making is increasingly data-driven, and data visualization is an important way and common way to analyze data and make decisions based on it. But data visualization presents challenges for people who are blind or have low vision. So the main approaches to providing accessible graphics to people who are blind or have low vision is to provide a text or a verbal description. Another approach is to use sonification, that's non-speech audio, or raised line drawings known as tactile graphics. On the right is an example of a tactile graphic, a histogram with braille labels. Now, tactile graphics are actually recommended for providing access to graphics which have spatial content, where the spatial content is important, such as charts and maps. But tactile graphics do not support interactive data exploration and analysis. That's because they have to be printed, and this means that they're expensive to produce and they take time to produce. So for this reason, researchers into accessible data visualization have tended to focus on speech and sonification to support interactive data visualization by blind people. So fortunately, refreshable tactile displays have arrived on the scene. So refreshable tactile displays feature grids of pins controlled by electromechanical actuators. So here's some examples. The dot pad refreshable tactile display, the Monarch refreshable tactile display, and the graffiti refreshable tactile display. Each of these refreshable tactile displays has just come onto the market or is just coming onto the market. And formerly, these displays were very expensive, but now they're relatively, well, they've dropped down significantly in price from $50,000 to about $10,000. They're not cheap, but they have become more affordable. These devices are the tactile equivalent of a computer monitor. For the first time, people who are blind and low vision have access to dynamic tactile graphics. They can potentially, these allow a blind analyst to create visualizations on the fly and zoom in and zoom out. But there has been very little research into the use of refreshable tactile displays for interactive data visualization. So that's why we're interested in this research. However, refreshable tactile displays have a serious limitation. They're low resolution. They have between 2,000 and 4,000 pins. So that means that you're dealing with essentially 2,000 to 4,000 pixels, which is not very many. This means there's not much space for braille text, and this limits the opportunity for providing braille labels and textual or braille overviews of the graphic. Overviews are actually really important because touch doesn't allow the reader to get an immediate overview of the graphic. For this reason, good tactile graphics come with a braille or a spoken overview. Luckily, there is a solution. Rather than providing braille labels and a braille overview, you can use speech. And our idea was to combine conversational agents with a refreshable tactile display. And this allows you to use provide a multimodal combination of touch gestures, and speech. And such a combination hasn't been explored before for data analysis by blind and low vision people. So just to give you a sense of what that's like.
This is a line chart depicting the change over time of Melbourne's water resources, specifically rainfall. The x-axis along the bottom of the graphic charts the years from 1995 to 2023. To the left, the y-axis lists rainfall from 0 millimeters to 800 millimeters in increments of 200 millimeters. This is a line chart depicting the change over time of Melbourne's water resources.
Okay, so of course, this combination of refreshable tactile displays and conversational agents raises really important research questions and fundamental research questions. The first and probably the most important is, how is this combination of refreshable tactile display and conversational agent actually useful? Secondly, how would blind and low vision users like to interact with such a system? And thirdly, how do they use the different modalities of touch gesture, and speech? So we ran a study to investigate these questions, or to try and answer these questions. This was a Wizard of Oz study. So 11 blind and low vision participants were presented with a system that we told them would allow them to explore and create or modify data visualizations using a mix of touch gesture, and speech. We asked them to use the speak aloud protocol to explain what they were doing, and then interact with the graphic in any way that they wanted to answer a number of tasks. Behind the scenes, a researcher modified the visualization and answered the queries using a synthesized voice. See the paper for more details. So our study investigated basic data understanding and analysis tasks and used common visualizations. We used two main data sets in our study. The first was the visualizations of a data set showing rainfall and water storage capacity over a 27-year period. Participants could choose to view rainfall and storage capacity separately or together using line charts or bar charts. The second data set was about the number of days of extreme fire risk that was expected because of climate change. And so here, participants could use an isarithmic map to explore this data. What did we find out? Importantly, we found out that participants were really emphatic that the system would make them feel more comfortable completing data tasks. Some of the comments were, would reduce the fear and anxiety of working with graphs and charts. It would make my life a whole lot easier. That was participant one, a data analyst. It could expand tertiary opportunities, access to statistics, mathematics, and computing algorithms. This was raised by a number of participants. And importantly, the system supported independence. And so one participant saying, it feels more independent. I don't need somebody to tell me the answer. The study also made clear the importance of multimodality, that the combination of refreshable tactile display and conversational agent provided benefits over each format alone. All participants combined touch gesture, and speech, but the choice of modality depended upon the task and prior experience with tactile graphics. See the paper for more details about this. So, all participants touched the graphic on the refreshable tactile display to get an initial feel for the data. And those familiar with tactile graphics tended to want to use the graphic to answer the questions, even if it took longer than simply asking the agents. So this is because they wanted to do it for themselves. They wanted to have independent understanding of the data, not rely on a conversational agent. So, for example, participants said, like, my instinct is to use my hands to first feel what the graph is doing, find the answer myself, then use my voice to verify it you feel more accomplished. Or another person said, I didn't ask for an analysis. I just wanted to know what the data was. So they wanted to actually feel the data themselves. So where do we go? It's clear that the combination of refreshable tactile display and conversational agent is extremely promising. Now we have to actually build an actual system and test it with users. But building the system makes clear that there are many really large visualization challenges that remain for us to address. I'm just going to give you a feel for some of those challenges. The first one is we've spent decades developing guidelines for the design and use of visual visualizations. There are no such guidelines for the designing and presenting graphics on a refreshable tactile display. The different perceptual characteristics of touch and vision and the low resolution of the refreshable tactile display mean visual guidelines are unlikely to directly translate. We need to develop new guidelines. Oops. The second is interaction is a major research challenge. How do we support interaction such as zooming or panning without confusing the user who remember, cannot see the display but only can sense the portion under their fingers? So my take-home message is refreshable tactile displays and conversational agents have a great potential for supporting independent access, but this raises a lot of interesting challenges for the visualization community, so please come and help us work on them. But before I finish, I just have two quick announcements or advertisements. First is we're looking for papers in a special issue of IEEE CGA on inclusive data experiences, and I've just finished writing a history of data visualization from 60,000 years ago to now. And of course, it also contains a chapter on tactile graphics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Really interesting combination of this multimodal. Unfortunately, we're completely out of time. So I posted my own question to Discord. I can see that Alex Lex also has a question on Discord. I encourage you to take those questions to Discord conversation then. Next, we have our next speaker is Birger Herman and presenting Touching the Ground, evaluating the effectiveness of data visualizations for a spatial data analysis task.
Hey everyone, I'm Birger Herman. I am a visiting faculty member at Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota. So I'd like to begin by taking a look at this visualization here about bird species population changes due to climate change. We can get information by the tooltips and the interactivity, but serving a website like this is likely not going to compare to the embodied experience of walking through the same data and looking up at the data values and sharing this experience with others. Data physicalizations like this bring data into the physical world and help us to better comprehend magnitudes through embodied interactions with our data. And studies in the literature have shown that physicalizations can be more memorable, more engaging, and even lead to real-world changed behavior. A few studies even show that physicalizations can be faster than their digital counterparts for some data analysis tasks. But the spatial data needed by today's science is very different from the data used in these prior studies. So our study compares data physicalizations with virtual reality and 2D topographic maps for analyzing digital elevation data similar to those needed by today's science. We hypothesize that time, errors, and confidence in the physical modality will be similar to or better than those in the digital modalities. We also record open-ended user feedback in a questionnaire to gain more detailed insights about participants' experiences with the physicalization. To design this experiment, we began in the physical modality because, at least with today's technology, this has the most constraints. And we decided on a 15 centimeter by 15 centimeter design, which is small enough to be picked up, but big enough to see the detail in the elevation data. We encode the elevation, it's a single variable here, the elevation, as the height of the physical objects. We use, in the virtual reality, we match this as closely as possible to the physical modality, and we use the Unity game engine's high-definition render pipeline with physically based materials and lighting. We matched each light's position, brightness, and color temperature, as well as the physical object's material properties and color to get a result like we see on the screen here with the virtual reality and the physical on the left. Since we're just comparing modalities, we limit the interactivity in this studies to only view manipulation operations like panning and rotating. And in VR, we can also do a bimanual gesture to scale the object up and down. And I just want to note that some folks might be surprised to see that we used a fish tank VR modality instead of today's more standard head-mounted displays. And so we did consider multiple different types of VR displays here, but we ended up deciding on a fish tank VR display because it has better angular resolution for the fine details than consumer-grade HMDs at the time of this study. And previous studies have actually shown that fish tank VR displays can perform better than fully immersive displays for outside-in analysis tasks like those we have in this study. The other digital modality we had is a 2D topographic map with mouse-based interactivity using the open source QGIS software. We had participants complete 3 tasks in every modality. The advect task, in the advect task, participants trace the path of steepest descent from the center of the circle to the edge, and they report the answer as an o'clock heading from noon to north. For example, this answer here would be 4:30. In the compare task, participants locate target points by their IDs on the grid and find the one with the lowest elevation, in this case, I6. And in the range task, participants locate a target circle on the physicalization or visualization and report its minimum and maximum elevation. In the VR and physical modalities, we provide a legend so that participants can look up numeric elevations. We had 24 participants, which was determined through an a priori power analysis, and each participant got 1 of 3 possible data sets. We had a full factorial within subject's design, so every participant was exposed to all 3 modalities and all 3 tasks, and the order of modalities and tasks were counterbalanced with Latin squares. So looking ahead to our results, let's examine these with respect to our hypotheses that physical performs similar to or better than digital. To do this, we examined all these with non-inferiority testing, specifically the 2 one-sided tests approach with an equivalence margin of 0.5, also from our a priori power analysis. Full results and a more detailed explanation than I can provide here are available in our paper and on our open access materials on OSF. But for now, I'll just share some charts here about our results, which will look kind of like this. All of our charts will be showing the physical minus the digital. Line in the middle is indicating that they have the same mean. Our shaded boxes show support for the hypothesis, or show the hypotheses, and error bars are 95% confidence interval. So basically, if our error bars are somewhere within these shaded boxes, that shows support for the hypothesis. Anyway, so hypothesis 1, we have support for this, and physical is actually the same or faster than digital for all 3 tasks. And indeed, we see physical actually outperforms digital by a large margin in a few cases. Physicalizations also have similar or lower errors and similar or higher confidence in several cases, except for the range task where H3 and H2 are not supported. Beyond our hypotheses, we look at the open-ended feedback for answering additional research questions about the role of touch and the pros and cons of using physicalization for such spatial data analysis. And to do this, we looked at video footage from our participants and also coded feedback from our questionnaire responses. And so from all of this, 2 major roles of touch emerged from this study. Firstly, haptic perception by actually touching the physical data and using the fingertip perception to understand the data better, and then also cognitive offloading to mark points and save them for comparison, for example. From our feedback, we also determined a possible design limitation in our study. In 3D, we gave participants a legend to look up numeric values, but in 2D, they were using contour lines. Both of these methods had intervals of 200 meters in the elevations, but 2D also had subcontours with an interval of 40 meters. So then also we noticed that using the 3D legend was a slow multi-step lookup process and together these factors may have contributed to the results that we saw in the range task for both the error and the confidence measures. In conclusion, we found that we're really not giving up performance when we're using physicalizations for spatial data analysis tasks like those in this study. And as a couple of immediate next steps, we could run a similar study with multivariate data, for example, diffusion tensor MRI imaging, or even blood flow in a human heart. And there are also further opportunities for additional measures to be used here beyond just performance, such as the memorability and the engagement with these physical objects. And to evaluate these, visualization researchers will need to adopt new methodologies from other disciplines. And I just have a final note that I want to leave off on here, which is looking even farther forward ahead. In this study, we deliberately used only view manipulation interactivity, but it's becoming increasingly possible to add rich digital interactivity to physicalizations with new sensors and extended reality technologies to facilitate data analysis features like zoom, filter, and details on demand. So I'm just going to leave this here. I'll remind you that all of our materials are available on the Open Science Foundation. Scan that QR code or follow that link if you'd like to do so. I'm also on the job market for next fall, so please reach out to get in touch, and I'd love to talk with you about my research and my teaching. So thanks for your time. Love to thank my co-authors and all the wonderful folks at VIS for making this conference happen despite all the changes in the last couple of weeks, and happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Very cool work. I still don't see any question on the slide though, but I have one. So how does the embodied interactions impact participants' confidence and understanding of complex spatial data compared to virtual and 2D visualizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of users' confidence when they were when they were actually performing these tasks, people were the most confident in 2D when it was actually the most complex task being the advect task, where you're looking at the physicalization and you're also tracing the path downhill. So participants were much more confident in both 3D modalities and specifically the physical modality than they were in 2D. And because of that additional touch perception that you get.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. So let us move on to our next speaker, Hamza Afzal. And Hamza, if you can start sharing your screen as I introduce your work. And presenting a paper on evaluating force-based haptics for immersive tangible interactions with surface visualizations. So please take it away.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? And can you hear my audio? Okay, thank you. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Hamza, and I'm a master's student at the University of Calgary. Today, I'm presenting my paper on evaluating force-based haptics for immersive tangible interactions with surface visualizations. Surface visualizations are essential for analyzing 3D shapes and their properties, with applications across domains such as medical imaging, computer-aided design, and geospatial data. Comprehending these visualizations rely heavily on key factors such as depth, distance, and orientation in 3D space. Adding sensory information also enhances visual comprehension. Examples of such include decal maps, color mapping, and ensembles. Tangible interactions technique takes it a step further, allowing users to engage directly with data. These interactions range from touchscreen, tablets, to 2D environments designed for 3D manipulation. Metoyer devices add layers of vibro-tactile, pneumatic, and thermal feedback, while immersive VR environments enhance visual comprehension and control through controller-based interactions. Force-based haptic feedback further improves depth perception, surface navigation, and access to occluded areas. From the literature, we group these interaction modes into three main categories for surfaces. Metoyer interactions that use handheld controllers and trackable styluses to draw or perceive data in 3D space, relying on visual cues and sensory feedback. On-surface interactions that utilize force feedback devices to enable physical interactions with surfaces, supporting tasks like drawing, tracing, and sketching. Assisted force interactions that employ forces like snapping, pulling, and pushing, with or without surface contact, to support sketching and drawing tasks, both mid-air or on a surface. In our research, we found that despite their utility, details on snap-to-surface assistive forces are rarely specified. Current approaches often result in either overly aggressive attachments or insufficient suction, compromising user experience. Our first contribution in this paper is to provide an implementation of a snap-to-surface force with a smooth force profile for snapping on arbitrary surfaces. And our second contribution is a comparative study examining this technique alongside existing haptic modes in standard surface interaction tasks. Our approach begins with implementing a proxy-based rendering technique for interacting with surfaces. The force are exerted on the stylus when in contact with the surface. Additionally, we introduce an assistive snapping force to haptic rendering process. The force activates when the stylus enters a predefined distance from the surface, directing the stylus towards the nearest point on the surface. Instead of using a force directly proportional to the distance from the surface, which may lead to a sudden force increase, we have implemented a nonlinear decaying function for our snap force. When the stylus enters the snap zone, the force magnitude rises slightly, and then gradually decreases, ensuring a minimal resistance for easier maneuverability when in contact with the surface. Conversely, when the stylus is lifted, the force increases to prevent unintentional disengagement with the surface. Finally, as the stylus exits the snap zone, the force tapers off smoothly, providing a seamless transition out of the snap influence. Then we compare this technique, referred to as haptic snap, with their other interaction modes. On-surface force-based haptic, referred to as haptic, and visual only, referred to as no haptic. We chose VR as our visualization medium for its stereoscopic vision and better depth perception. Our goal is to investigate the effectiveness of these interaction modes on various surface tasks. Our study focuses on two general types of surface interactions based on Besancon's taxonomy of interaction for 3D spatial data: point localization and curve brushing. Point localization includes three subcategories: protrusion point, depression point, and random value point. Similarly, for curve brushing also has three types: visual curve brushing, groove brushing, and annotation brushing. Our evaluation involved 24 participants, each participant completing 3 sessions, one for each interaction mode. Each session included 12 tasks with 2 trials each, totaling 720 trials per participant. The main trial lasted 30 to 45 minutes with a 15-minute break in between sessions. We recorded completion time and accuracy for each task, along with responses from pre- and post-study questionnaire. To compare the modalities, we looked at pairwise differences between mean with 75% confidence intervals. When looking at task completion time, our results showed that haptic mode was slower for point localization tasks. However, the curve brushing tasks, we found no significant difference in performance between the interaction modes. Focusing specifically on point localization tasks, we observed that interaction modes involving haptics were slower for protrusion point localization, while other tasks show no significant differences. While comparing relative error in the localized point, haptic snap has the highest error in protruded region than its counterpart, whereas it shows significantly less error in depression point localization. For curve brushing tasks, we measure error by calculating the root mean square error between the brushed curve and the medial axis of the band texture in the visualization. Our results indicate that haptic mode had higher overall error rate compared to the other interaction modes. This difference was significant for both contour and groove brushing tasks, while it was insignificant for annotation tasks. Similarly, we measured curve irregularity on the brush curves. Our results show no haptic mode overall yielded highly irregular curves. A similar trend could be observed at a per task level. This trend is illustrated in this visualization. The haptic mode shows high deviation but maintains a smooth path, while no haptic is closer to the medial axis, yet highly irregular. Haptic snap demonstrates a smoother path with less deviation. We observed these patterns, especially in areas with high surface curvature, where the stylus aligns at an angle to the surface normal. In these regions, the haptic mode tends to deviate more and requires higher number of corrections compared to the other two modes. Participants' feedback revealed that haptic was perceived as the easiest to use, with no haptic as the second best option. Interestingly, while haptic snap led to smoother and more accurate curves, participants reported higher physical and mental fatigue due to constant force feedback. No haptic was seen as less practical, but participants felt confident in their results, achieving good accuracy despite reduced smoothness. Our findings are summarized as follows. We found that snapping force excels in locating depression points, but struggles with protrusions. For point localization, accuracy and speed remains unaffected across interaction modes when visual cues are used. In curve brushing, accuracy with haptic feedback depends on the angle of applied force, while yielding smoother curves. Snapping force has challenges with dense, small-scale features. And finally, we propose interchanging haptic and no haptic modes depending on the task and surface features. Some limitations of our work are as follows. 1, a notable learning curve across interaction modes. 2, a smaller participant pool yielding nearly significant results. 3, interaction limited to stylus-based haptic devices while not exploring other options. And 4, tasks limited to only explicit surface models. Future work could explore long-term effects in a longitudinal study, test complex surfaces and multivariate data, evaluate other haptic devices and variable force profiles, and develop an automated mode selection for surface interactions. Finally, I would like to express my gratitude to my supervisor, Dr. Usman, whose support has been invaluable to the success of this research. In addition to my research, I co-founded a company, CraftXR, that specializes in VR-based education. I look forward to connecting and working with like-minded people in the visualization domain. I thank you for your time, and I'm open to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Excellent work. I still don't see any questions on the Slido. In the meanwhile, I'll ask one question. So I'm curious to see if you had or see any impact of this force-based haptic on users' learning and retention of spatial information.
Yes, that's definitely was one of our consideration when we were designing the study. From the feedback that we got from the participants, people using touch sensation when interacting with the surfaces felt more confident and were able to memorize or remember what they were doing during the actual task more vividly compared to other mode of interactions. But this specific thing, I would probably argue is more for a longitudinal study focus, where we can study the effect of these interactions over a long period of time and see their retention and memorability of these of the surfaces and the data that is being represented.
Absolutely, makes sense. Definitely a great future work. Okay. Please do continue asking your question and have a lovely discussion on Discord. Let us move to our final speaker of the session. So last but not least, we have Lishan Zhao presenting a work on...
Yeah, thank you. And I will share my slide.
Absolutely. Take it away.
Okay.
So their work is entitled Spatial Touch, Exploring Spatial Data Visualization in Cross-Reality.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you so much for the introduction. So this is Li Xiangzhao from Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University, and I will present the paper Spatial Touch, Exploring the Spatial Data Visualization in Cross-Reality. So this work is directed by Dr. Liu Yu from Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University, and also the Professor Tobias Isenberg from INRIA. So now I will introduce the background and the issues. For many visualization scenarios, people need to see 3D and 2D representations to better understand the data. So most likely they show the representations in different views, but they also want to identify, sometimes they want to identify the specific place to compare the structure or to relate the information in other views. So some works combine these views into one view, but they still need to decide where to place these visualizations. So an interesting work proposed last year on the right figure, so is to visualize an integrated 2D and 3D representations in a cave environment. So with the 3D glasses and with the gesture input, you can interact with the 3D data. However, it might be difficult to directly touch the visualization. So we are thinking to create a new environment that can integrate both 2D and 3D interfaces to realize the 2D and 3D representations. So in our environment, so we use a HoloLens to show the 3D representation, and we have a 2D display to show either 2D or projected 3D visualization. So from the user's view, you can see that you can always have a correct understanding of the 3D data structure, no matter where the visualization is placed, either in the 2D or 3D, or half in 2D, half in 3D. So in this case, we combine the best of 2D and 3D environment into one, and we create a seamless environment to display our visualization. And to achieve that, we use 2D display environment to show the 2D data or 3D data. And at the same time, we also have the HoloLens view to show the 3D visualization. And we combine them together into one, and we have the integrated seamless visualization. So on this virtuality continuum axis, our position is here. We combine both the 2D and 3D side. And to achieve a seamless integration, the camera parameter of the 2D display is updated in each frame. So it's based on the position or the orientation of both your headset and the screen. So the more details, you please refer to our paper, you will interested in it. So now the question comes. So first, we are interested in the angle of the surface. So how do we put this 2D display so that users can better understand the data and it also support them to interact with data? And second is about visualization. So how can we visualize data in such an environment? But one thing is certain that in a 3D space, the HoloLens will show a stereoscopic rendering. So what about the visualization of 2D display should be? This is an interesting question, actually. And another question is that how do we support users to interact with data in this environment? So as we know, in 3D space, it's natural to interact with gesture input. Well, on 2D, it's natural to use the touch interaction. But at some point in our environment, users' finger will touch the 2D interface. So if their interaction mentality will change or not, so this is an interesting question to explore also. And with these questions, we did an elicitation study. So we provided different data sets in this environment. We gave participants some tasks to do. For example, we asked them to adjust the screen angle at any time and to move the data or rotate the data to a target location. And we also asked them to select the data either in 2D or in 3D or part in 2D or part in 3D. And we recorded their actions and learned their opinions through the questionnaire. So we found some interesting insights. For example, that the 20 degree is an optimal screen angle. So that in this case, users can better view the data. And second is that the user would prefer the fish tank VR view on the 2D display. And we also detected many interactions that either in 2D or 3D spaces, and we created this design space. So interestingly, we found many interactions that happens across 2D and 3D spaces. So we've highlighted here. For example, they can naturally grab things from 2D to 3D. Their interaction stage may change from 2D to 3D, but they have the continuous actions. So we implemented all the interactions in our environment, and we created a so-called spatial touch. Okay, now I want to demonstrate 3 different use cases that to show how our environment can help researchers to explore their data. And so with the molecular data now the rainbow representation is displayed half on the 2D display and half in the HoloLens. So they integrated so well. You can see it's hard to distinguish the boundary of the 2D and 3D. So I want to show that in these 2 environments that we can show the different representations of the data. So in HoloLens, we can see one representation, and on the 2D display, we can see another representation. So the users can grab it out, put it in, and see different locations, the different representations. And with the medical data, so it's very interesting so that we can also see the different representations in the 2D and 3D. And more important, users can change the visualization parameters to adjust the representation. And you can also open the data. You can pick it up and see the details inside and make some annotations or make measurements. So we also support users to make annotations even the data is visualized below the screen. So this is a very intuitive design. And with the astronomical data, so in this case, we can see that the data distribution in the 3D space, and we can select the data either on 2D or in 3D or half in 2D, half in 3D. And we developed many interaction techniques that we listed in the design space. Here, I only want to show you the most interesting ones. So when the user grab the data from 2D to 3D, they will first, for example, they will first pose their fingers on the 2D display and now then close their fingers to move the data out to the 3D environment. Once the 2 fingers are touched, so that the visualization is directly grabbed in your fingertip, then you can continue with the pinch gesture in the 3D space to manipulate it. Then you can move to another place, put it down, open your fingers, and push the data into the screen. Yeah, this is a very quite intuitive and continuous interaction technique. And another example is the selection interaction. That it can happen in both 2D and 3D space together. So you can see you can brush the data in the air in 3D, and you can draw a lasso at the same time on 2D. And the input together, they can select the region of interest. We further did the expert interview with the domain experts like biologists, astronomers, doctors. And so in this case, we want to see the potential of our environment in supporting them to explore their scientific data. So we also did the evaluation with XR experts to test our design. So for more details, please refer to our paper. And we summarize the existing cross-reality environments for the data visualization and discuss these environments based on the data, based on the task, and also the application scenarios. And we have open source the code for our environment simulator on the GitHub, so you can scan this QR code and download it. And we also share all the design details and the study results on the OSF. So thank you for your attention, and I will take your questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lishan, for the really cool work and fantastic demos that you showed us. Impressive.
Yeah.
I still don't see any question on Slido, but I'll start by asking my question.
Yeah.
I wonder if you found any specific interaction strategies that were more effective for certain types of spatial data representations.
For certain space, actually, we did a preliminary study, and we are trying to find some common interaction techniques. So how do the how do people use it? How do they interact with it? How do they interact with our environment in a common way? So we collect a lot of we collect all the interactions, and we make the space. And yes, of course, for different different data set, for different scientific domain, for different scientific field, they have their own tasks, they have their own data, they have their own features. So of course so in this case, of course our so for the different tasks, so of course we need to develop different interaction techniques tailored for that the specific need, right?
Sounds perfect. Thank you. We do have one question from the audience. They're asking, what technique do you use to anchor or register the 3D AR object on the plane?
Sorry.
So the question is, what technique do you use to anchor or register the 3D AR object on the plane?
So first, this is actually the problem of registration. So first, we need to we use the QR code to track the position of the screen, and we need to make sure that the digital screen is aligned with the real screen. So in this part, we use like a QR code technique and to detect its orientation position, and we slightly adjust it manually to make sure they align together. And then we use the live tracker to track the movement. Maybe sometimes the user may change the position or orientation of the screen, and we can just track it. And also, yeah, this slide, I think. And here, so after all of this, we update the parameter. Actually is the matrix of the camera of 2D display. We update it. We calculate it in each frame based on where you are looking at. So what the position, the orientation of your headset, and also the position or orientation of the screen. So if you are interested in our algorithm, you can read our paper. Actually, we do all these 5 steps in each frame to make sure the wheels are aligned together. They aligned the wheel so that you can see it is a 3D object, not split, just the 2D and 3D things, right?
Sounds great. Thank you. We do have one more question, and we actually have time for it. So if you can quickly respond to this question, do you think this interaction is viable for abstract geospatial infoviz? Trajectories, question mark, space-time cubes, or other visualization items?
Actually, yes. I think if it is like we build this environment. The aim is to the aim of our the aim is to our aim is to merge the 2D and 3D space actually. So So we make it an integrated environment, and they combine so well, right? So no matter if you have some 2D representation or 3D representation, no matter what it was, like a space-time cube or something, you have the 2D representation, you have the 3D representation, then you can try to fit in this environment. This is our aim. We make a general environment so that we break the gap between the 2D and 3D space. So you can do anything. You decide it. So it's based on your needs and your task. So you can decide where to visualize what, where you want to place this visualization. What do you want to visualize on 2D display or in a 3D space, or what content will be. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let me thank all of our speakers once more. And thank you everyone for attending this session and your engagement with speakers and your questions. Little announcement from my side is that we are running a visualization for Social Good Meetup, which starts in 30 minutes. So check Discord or email one of us or Evan Pack. I posted his email on the Discord. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye.